When I was thinking about this topic and who I could speak about this with, having somebody that really understood data first and then how it applies to legal stuff, I think was fantastic. And talking with Jen a number of times, I said, I love the way her head wraps around these challenges that corporate legal has related to data. And then I started tying it into AI, and I thought, well, it makes a lot of sense to use something like this, which is garbage in, genius out, because many people feel that's what we're getting when we have AI. And so I'm going to challenge some of those assumptions and say why data intelligence, not Gen AI, is what's going to transform the law. And many of the sessions we've heard today have been leading exactly to that, saying, start with the data, right? It was data governance. I mean, it's in her name, the data diva. So starting with the data governance and how that tied to privacy, how it ties all these, we're starting to arrive at that same place. Start with the data first.
Yep.
Is somebody advancing, or do I have a thing?
A clicker?
Yeah. Can I just go click, click? I'd do it myself if I could.
Do we have a thing?
I see a thing, yeah.
I mean, the last foot, I could have made it.
It was a good effort, though. Let's see if this works. Okay, it is. So I grew up, this will date me, you grew up in the 80s. I grew up in the 70s in Detroit. And I was told when I was a kid, come home when the street lights are on. Anybody else was told that? Yeah. Exactly, because they just trusted that we would be doing all the things we should be doing, and we would arrive home in one piece and everything would be fine. But eventually they had to put on commercials. It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are? It's like they had to be reminded that we might still be out there somewhere. But again, the trust factor was there. And I use that corollary because data has been that way for at least a couple decades within any organization.
Yep.
We just store all this stuff. We trust that it's there. We think everything is fine. And eventually we go, oh, wait a minute.
Well, and for decades, the whole protocol was, well, we better keep everything, right? And so it's stashed in a corner somewhere in a box that somebody forgets about. And then when you're looking for it for either a legal hold purpose or even ECA for an outside counsel for dispositive motions, you have to lift up the covers, figure out where the data sits, and you realize that you have 17 copies of the same thing in these mystery compartments.
Right, or in repositories, and what's funny is this is all kind of coming full circle, or as some of the Texas folks say, chickens coming to roost now, because it is true. Data growth is at an all-time high. It has surpassed oil in terms of its value to the globe, right? And it's costing us more. So M365, sorry, John, if you're still here. Microsoft and others are starting to monetize the volume of data at the source, but it's added a lot more growth when we tack on Gen AI, but it's also added a fair amount of risk. And the shifting of that point of data monetization is what's key for corporate counsel, because we need to be able to keep that in our own wheelhouse. But at the same time, the threat actors have kind of gotten smarter, and they are targeting companies that have large volumes of sensitive data. They're not just locking down the stuff anymore. They're exploiting and extorting, and they're leveraging this information. I'm working on a cyber breach case right now that's starting at 160 terabytes, and they anticipate it'll be 800 terabytes by the time it's all said and done for a hospital system. And these are getting to be normal. I had 2 in the same week. They said, yeah, we got at least a couple hundred terabytes. And the thing is, Gen AI is not an answer for that, because it's inversely correlated cost-wise. We could throw Gen AI at this entire corpus of data, but it'll hallucinate like crazy. It'll hallucinate like it's been doing mushrooms. I mean, it'll be so crazy and what it comes up with, but it won't give us the kind of response that we need. And that's some of the challenges. The traditional tools haven't kept pace either. So of course we're looking to Gen AI for some of these answers. Have you been finding Gen AI is going to make a big difference within your legal space?
So as you mentioned, I think the first goal is to figure out where your data is so that you can distill down the data set to apply the Gen AI after the fact. So you're targeting what you actually need to minimize the risk of hallucinations, to minimize the risk of your, for the lack of a better phrase, overstimulating your data set, right?
That's a great point, and it's a perfect segue because, as Debbie had said too, it exposes gaps. So I was promising some of the folks at our table, who just said, I really love that quote by Debbie. I said, I got one really similar. Gen AI doesn't fix your data. It cannot fix your data. It exposes your data. So the gaps in terms of volume, who can access it, the amount of risk. Here's a good example for you. Somebody I know very well works at a very large company that you've probably got boxes from on a daily basis. I know I have, especially during COVID. They created their own in-house AI, and they said everybody has to use this. Of course, they gave it a name. A year later, the same person was told, you now need 24 hours of AI training. What? Well, what happened was, even though it was a private system, somebody had said, hey, I'm working on this new product and I need a product plan. And the LLM said, well, you'd be interested in this product plan because it sounds like it's really similar to yours, and here's something fully baked. Turns out it was a top secret project.
Oh.
So it got exposed within the organization. And then, of course, human nature being what it is, it sounded really juicy. So it got exposed to the outside world too. Therefore, they needed to look at permissions, right? Access to data and exposure risk, and then just teach everybody how to use this stuff. So you're absolutely right. Start with the data first, because it's about the intelligence. I didn't read that last little part. It generates answers, but the data intelligence and the enrichment you create determines whether those answers are right. So this goes to really what Jen has been talking about. Corporate legal teams struggle with this lack of insight into the data at the source, right? We're forced to grabbing it all.
Well, not only are we forced to grabbing it all, traditional tools ask the person, where does your data sit? But they don't know where their data sits because they inherited data from the person that handled it before them, that the person that sat in the role before them. And so really approaching and attacking it from a different angle and figuring out where is your data, where does it sit, where does it live, what is the source system, and then tying it back to an actual human being with a job responsibility that can then explain that data to you actually makes the process way more meaningful. So that even if you do use a Gen AI tool like Copilot, you have a human in the loop to be able to answer questions. Oh, well, that's something we did 15 years ago that you wouldn't have known had you just pointed your tool directly at the data.
And it sounds like you can then extract more value, because that way you could say classify that data or label that back so that when you do go and hunt for it later, you'll find it easier, but then also know maybe I don't need to dig in this hole.
Right. And over time, as systems have changed, 10 years ago, we stored our data on this network share somewhere. So now we have all of that from 100 years ago. And now we've moved into a SharePoint environment. Now we have all of that, a significant portion of it, which is duplicative. And now we've moved into a Exchange group mailbox environment. And now we've moved out of that into something else, right? Yeah. So now theoretically, you have 4 copies or 5 copies or 100 copies of the same data that doesn't make any sense with slight alterations. Which one came first? Which one's the end product? And
anyone ever dealt with that? Version control.
Right. Dealing with the data first, distilling it down to what is necessary, and then finding a person to associate with that data minimizes your data set, minimizes risk, and allows you to actually do something meaningful when you're using these powerful AI tools.
Cool. So the future is not different tools or having to add AI layers. It's managing and connecting the data where it resides. So great story. Now show me the data. So these are some examples where in-place data first has some real-world impact. Worked on a project related to context intelligence, right? So there's the basic concept. This client had several million documents that were all contracts, and they said, we have no freaking clue what is in these, how we would classify them. We kind of can search keywords, who it belongs to. I said, give me about 10,000 of those. Let's create a taxonomy, apply it to the rest of the corpus of the data. We did all that in the space of a week and a half because we were dealing with data at the source rather than lifting and shifting and trying to classify. Then they said, hey, can you go find every contract that deals with these 3 entities that contain French language and that were digitally signed? Yeah, actually, within about 2 minutes, they had all the answers that they were looking for. So the point is that we can do a lot of this kind of work. If we don't lift and shift data, it makes a difference.
Lifting and shifting is expensive. Yeah. Everybody knows that. And it's not really productive. Why am I going to move the data if I can find it, index it, classify it, and only export or extract from the system of record what I actually need.
Yeah, great point. Only what you really need. Another good example, did we have 10 or 15 minutes on this bit? 15.
3 more to go.
Awesome. That's all we need because we're in the final stretch. Had a DSAR. Ever familiar with DSARs, Digital Subject Access Requests? Yeah. With 36,000 names in it. It was sort of bank processing company in the UK. A DSAR aggregator hit them up. They had 110 terabytes of data in M365, no problem. Salesforce, no big deal. HubSpot, Mixpanel. How do you go through that? They started lifting and shifting data, like you said. 2 months later, 3 months later, 4 months, they got
$1 million.
20% of it, yeah, and millions of dollars. So they said, all right, help, we heard you nerds know how to solve for this. And built a Mixpanel connector, we have the rest of the connectors. Indexed 110 terabytes in a week and a half. Ran the 97 million searches to arrive at the 936 subjects that were actually reflective and responsive to that DSAR in another week and a half. So inside of a month, went through 110 terabytes of data, solved their DSAR issues. Again, you can only do that if you're doing it in place and touch the data you really need, because otherwise it gets costly. So what you want to do is start thinking of, I think I jumped on those, the move is towards drag, or DRAG, or DORAG, if it helps you remember it. I did that, I think, at one of the sessions. But it's data governance follows this kind of pattern. We discover, we reduce, we automate, and govern. So we need to do that on a regular basis. Drag, it's not a drag, it's actually a good thing. It reduces drag in the movement of your data. So what can you do today? The solution is not speeding throughput, right? That's how we've been measuring Gen AI. Look how I can do this so much faster. Why speed bad processes, right? Focus on, as you said, data first, people second, get our tasks done, but treat data as an asset. So if, as we're doing these things, we can classify them and understand them and get more value from them, we're winning.
Right.
Challenge legacy workflows, pretend like you're your own teenagers. Why? Why are we doing this? So what? What are we doing this for?
Do we need all of this?
Do we need all of this? Yeah, exactly. Minimize data early and often. It's like voting in Chicago, where we vote early and often. Minimize data early and often. Invest in upstream intelligence. Some of us are here in the room from the EDRM 2.0 committee. I see Ms. Clerkin over there and others. And that's one of the things we've looked at when we redesigned the EDRM, is more of a nod towards this. Is understanding and looking at upstream intelligence. So if your AI strategy doesn't start with data, it will end in risk, because AI is the engine and data intelligence is the fuel. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Jen.
Yeah, no problem.
Fantastic perspective.